You wake up with a jolt, not from a bad dream, but from the stench of damp rope, unwashed bodies, and something suspiciously fishy. It's not even fish. It's just the boat. The boat smells like regret and mildew. You're in the middle of the sea, sometime in the year 1347, aboard a creaking, wooden coffin masquerading as a ship. Congratulations, you're a medieval sailor now. Your bed? A sack of straw, that's wetter than your will to live. The ceiling above you leaks when it rains. And it rains a lot. You have scurvy. Or you will. Probably by Thursday. You sit up, try to stretch your back, and immediately regret it. Your spine has been politely compacted into something resembling a spiral staircase thanks to the ship's ergonomic sleeping quarters. You'd complain, but your crewmates would just laugh, and then cough blood into their beards. You think that's meant to be bonding. It's still dark out. The sky is a color you didn't know existed, somewhere between soot and existential crisis. You hear the captain stomping above deck, shouting something about a black cat, which, if you've done your medieval homework, is very bad. Like, throw someone overboard bad. You sigh. Someone's going in the water today. And it's probably Dave. Dave has the energy of a mun who definitely brought a black cat on board, probably to eat it later. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's lying in bed listening to 14th century nautical paranoia from around the globe. And if it's 3 a.m., solidarity. You and me both. Now, back to the dread. Here's the thing about medieval sailors. They were terrified of everything. Bad weather? Obviously a sign from God. Calm seas? Also a sign from God. Running out of salted pork? Definitely Satan. And you, brave soul, are now stuck on a floating monastery of sweaty men who all think the moon is watching them. Literally. Not symbolically. They yell at the moon. Your ship, which has an official name like the Lady Miriam's Mercy, but everyone called the Drunk Carp, is headed somewhere important. Probably the Levant. Or Norway. Or nowhere, really. In the 14th century, navigation was more like educated flailing. No GPS. No Google Maps. Just the stars, the sun, and a deep belief that sneezing with your left eye meant bad winds were coming. As you climb above deck, blinking through salt spray and trauma, you see the crew in full panic. A bird, not a seagull, but some kind of ominous crow, has landed on the rigging. The men are arguing whether this means the ship will sink or if it means someone on board has cheated on their wife. It's always one of those two. And here's where we begin our descent into the crusty, absurd, surprisingly detailed world of medieval sailing superstitions. A world where you're not just trying to survive the sea. You're also dodging curses, watching the clouds for omens, and praying you didn't accidentally offend a sea sprite. Let's start with something light, bananas. Yes, bananas. In the medieval sailors' pantheon of forbidden things, bananas were up there with women on board, killing albatrosses, and naming a boat unsinkable. You weren't even allowed to mention bananas, because nothing screams historically accurate panic like tropical fruit. The logic? Well, bananas spoil quickly, they can cause fermentation in other produce, and they might attract insects. But instead of saying, this fruit causes mold, sailors just decided it was cursed. You love science. So if someone snuck a banana onto the ship, they'd probably get thrown overboard. Or at least be forced to sleep near the bilge pump, which is the medieval maritime equivalent of sleeping in a sewer that moves. Every superstition had some little grain of truth buried under a mountain of paranoia. Like the one about whistling on board. Whistling. Yes. If you whistle at sea, you're basically inviting a storm. Why? Because the wind might hear you and think, ah yes, a duet, and then destroy the ship. Makes sense. Better not to whistle. Just hum awkwardly in a minor key while your friends vomit beside you. You look around the deck and see the ship's figurehead, a carved wooden woman with no arms and disturbingly lifelike eyes. She's supposed to protect the ship. Somehow. Maybe by glaring at incoming waves. The crew treats her like a minor deity. They've tied flowers around her neck. No one makes eye contact with her before noon. One time, someone made a joke about her hair being a bit much, and he fell overboard 48 hours later. Coincidence? Nobody thinks so. Certainly not the Mun currently scrubbing her feet with wine. His name is Otmar. Otmar believes the statue talks to him. You decide not to ask questions. Every object on this ship has a sacred meaning. The anchor is never to be mentioned out loud, because naming it might wake it up. The sails must be hoisted in a specific order, or the wind gods will get confused and send you backward. If a rat runs across your foot, it's good luck. Unless it bites you. Then it's bad luck. Also, tetanus. The logic is shaky. But confidence is high. Oh, and don't even think about bringing a priest on board. That's right. Priests are bad luck. Holy men equals unholy death. Why? Because their presence apparently attracts storms, sea monsters, and other divine temper tantrums. The theory is that God doesn't want his people bobbing around in ocean puddles. He wants them safely inland, doing respectable things like burning heretics and misquoting Latin. So if your ship sets sail and someone reveals that Father Gregory is in the hold, well, you're either turning back or building him a raft. Women were also considered unlucky at sea, unless they were wooden, bolted to the bow, and had no opinion on fishing. A real, living woman on board? Absolute chaos. The ocean gets jealous. The men get distracted. The figurehead gets offended. Or something like that. The logic, again, is flimsy. But the fear? Very real. Which brings us to your captain. Your captain is a superstitious wreck of a Mun with a beard that contains more crumbs than hair. He has 3 lucky coins, 1 cursed thumb, and a long list of things you are never to say out loud, including the word drown, or sink, or Thursday. Apparently, someone died on a Thursday. Once. And now it's banned. You start calling it the 4th day. Everyone nods solemnly. No one knows how calendars work anymore. At this point, you're probably wondering, how did all of this start? Why did medieval sailors become walking bundles of anxiety and fish scales? Well, the ocean was terrifying. Still is, honestly. But in the Middle Ages, the sea was a place where people vanished. You left port with 40 men and came back with 12 and a dramatic story about sirens and ghost ships. Nobody had charts. Nobody had weather reports. And compasses were considered dark magic by more than one clergyman. So instead of understanding the sea, sailors decided to fear it, and then made up elaborate rules to feel slightly more in control. Like the rule that says you must never rename a ship. That's big one. If you bought a ship called the Mercy of Saint Enid, and decided that name was a little too soft, too gentle, and tried to rename it Bloodstorm 8000, well, good luck. You just cursed the vessel. The ocean remembers. The ocean holds grudges. You stare into the water for a moment. It's a lovely shade of deep and unforgiving. There's no land in sight. No birds. Just the sound of creaking wood and the occasional cough from someone who definitely has a plague. You're starting to understand why superstition thrived here. Logic doesn't float in the middle of the Atlantic. But fear? Fear sails first class. Even the meals have rituals. Before eating, the men cross themselves. Not for religious reasons, but because last week someone bit into a weevil. Now, every biscuit is suspect. You examine your hardtack. It looks like chalk. Tastes like regret. You take a bite and feel your molar fracture. You decide you weren't that hungry after all. Night falls slowly on the ship. Lanterns sway, casting golden light on weathered faces. A storm is brewing. You can feel it. The captain mutters something about angry spirits in the west wind. You nod as if you understand. West is the left, right? No one knows. You lie down again on your bed of damp straw, pull a thin, itchy blanket over yourself, and listen to the ocean groan. Somewhere above you, someone is softly singing to appease the sea. It's a lullaby. Or a warning. Either way, you drift off, surrounded by ropes, rats, and 400 years of nautical paranoia. Sweet dreams. Unless you snore. Then the wind might mistake you for whistling. And that's how you die in your sleep. Welcome aboard. You wake up to someone throwing up near your head. It's not aggressive vomiting, more of a gentle trickle, like a defeated fountain. You don't even flinch anymore. By now, you've accepted that seasickness is just a personality trait. The Mun responsible is named Hob. Hob once swore he saw a sea witch dancing on a wave, and everyone believed him, because he's got the stare of a Mun who's either seen the beyond, or just hasn't slept since Easter. Your blanket smells like mildew and ambition. You stretch your arms and realize someone has stolen your left boot. Again. You consider filing a complaint, but the ship doesn't have HR. It barely has stairs. What it does have, however, is an absolutely obsessive commitment to completely irrational traditions. Because here, 400 miles from anything resembling a salad, superstition is law. Today is a ritual day. You know this because the first mate, a moon who smells like boiled vinegar and grief, is already drawing chalk lines on the deck. It's not day. You don't know what that means, but apparently, if you don't tie 3 knots before noon, the wind stops cooperating. One of the knots must be tied with your eyes closed. Another must be tied upside down. The third must be tied by someone who's never kissed a woman. That's Dave's job. Dave is very qualified. But hey, before you completely drift off into a rope-based trance, remember to gently nudge that like button if you're enjoying this insomnia-friendly descent into madness. Subscribe, too, not out of obligation, but out of love for damp facts and history told at the speed of a snail on Dramamine. And if you're still awake, tell me where you're listening from and how late it is for you. There's something oddly beautiful about 3 a.m. naval trivia echoing in a stranger's bedroom. Right then, back to the chaos. One of the older sailors is carving a small figurine out of driftwood. He calls it his wind god. He talks to it before storms. He talks to it after storms. He talks to it during breakfast. No one questions it. If he doesn't talk to the wind god, the ship might stall, or catch fire, or slowly fill with frogs. No one knows how, but it has happened according to Walter, who once mistook a jellyfish for a hat. You, being the newcomer, are still adjusting to the idea that the entire voyage is ruled by invisible forces and arbitrary rules. For instance, if you drop a spoon, it means bad news is coming. If you drop 2 spoons, it means someone on land is sleeping with your wife. If the spoon bounces, you're going to survive the next storm. Probably. Unless it's a Wednesday storm, which everyone knows doesn't count. These rituals aren't fun. They're not charming. They're coping mechanisms. Being at sea means watching your friends slowly dissolve into sunburned mystics. It means long hours of silence broken only by sea shanties that double as warnings. Like the Ballad of the Bleeding Moon, a song that includes a cheerful verse about how if the moon turns red, it's a sign that a passenger is a liar. Guess what color the moon is tonight? Red. Obviously. You hope it's not you. You did tell the captain you were a skilled navigator. And technically, you can read a compass. When it's not spinning wildly. And when you're not hallucinating from vitamin deficiency. The crew gathers around the mast for the daily spit ceremony. That's right. Every morning, before hoisting sails, each sailor must spit on a chunk of coal and toss it into the sea. Why? To appease the hunger of the deep. Which sounds poetic. Until you realize the deep is probably just full of confused coal and slightly insulted fish. You perform the ritual. Your spit is slightly frothy. The men nod with approval. Froth means strength. Or madness. The line blurs quickly out here. As the day drags on, the sky darkens. A storm approaches. The lookout screams something unintelligible, but you catch the word cloud demons. That's not a metaphor. He thinks the clouds have faces. You squint toward the horizon and, okay, yeah, that one does kind of look like your mother-in-law. A sudden flurry of activity breaks out. The ropes are being untied and retied. Lanterns are doused. Someone's reciting a Latin prayer backwards. You're not sure if it's helping or if it's just giving the storm ideas. Then the captain does something dramatic. He pulls out his storm bones. They are, in fact, real bones. Carved, polished, probably human. He rattles them in a pouch and throws them onto the deck like dice. The crew stares. Silence. He leans down, mutters a phrase, and announces, "The wind is displeased." This is followed by 10 full minutes of the men turning their shirts inside out. Apparently, that helps. Another crew member climbs to the crow's nest and starts singing a song about sea monsters. It's a dirge, slow and eerie. It includes lines like, "O deep mouth of sorrow, swallow not my flesh." Everyone hums along. You try, but you're slightly off-key, and now 3 people won't make eye contact with you. That's fine. You didn't want friends anyway. Let's talk omens. Medieval sailors saw omens everywhere. A creaking board? Ghost. A sudden gust? Sea hag. An itchy foot? Pyrocurse. A dead gull washing up on deck? Absolute catastrophe. Even dreams were dissected like portside fish. Dream of fire? That's good luck. Dream of cats? That's death. Dream of a cat on fire? That's the apocalypse. Or just a weird Tuesday. They even had omens related to how the ship rocked. Too much to the left? Ghosts. Too much to the right? Ghosts in a bad mood. Perfectly still? The calm before ghost-based destruction. You're sensing a theme. Medieval sailors believed in ghosts the way modern people believe in brunch. Absolutely. Without question. And often with mimosas, if they could afford citrus. You're starting to internalize the madness. You see a fish jump out of the water and instinctively whisper, "Thank you, Ocean Father." You scratch your leg and think, could be a blessing. Or leg rot. You spot a cloud shaped like a duck and immediately wonder if you're being warned about betrayal. The worst part is, it works. The more you believe it, the more you feel connected to the ship. The more you think maybe, just maybe, your ridiculous morning ritual is the reason the storm passed you by. And if that's what gets you through another night of soggy biscuits and slowly dying optimism, so be it. Evenings at sea are weird. There's no Netflix, no podcasts, no doom scrolling, just the creak of the hull, the occasional splash, and the gentle whispers of grown men muttering old wives' tales into the dark. You join in. You find yourself knocking on wood, spitting over your shoulder, crossing your fingers before opening a barrel. You have no idea why. You don't even ask. Because now you're a sailor. And superstition is your love language. Later that night, a gull lands on the mast. Everyone gasps. You'd think Elvis had appeared. A gull landing is neutral, unless it turns its head 3 times. It turns once. Twice. You hold your breath. It scratches its beak and takes off. Crisis averted. Someone claps you on the back and says, "You've got good luck bones." You don't know what that means. You don't ask. Before bed, the ship performs one final ritual, the night song. A slow, somber chant, sung while facing the ocean. Some of the words are lost to time. Others are just vowels stretched into eternity. You hum along, eyes closed, letting the sound wrap around you like a fog blanket. It doesn't make sense, but it feels safe. You lie down. Your straw bed is slightly less wet tonight. Maybe because you shoved someone else off it. Doesn't matter. You curl up, listening to the groan of wood, the flap of canvas, and the deep, ancient breath of the sea. The ocean doesn't care about your fears. But the rituals help you pretend it does. And so, you sleep. Salt-crusted, slightly cursed, deeply exhausted. Welcome to the floating church of irrational hope. We sail at dawn. You wake up because someone is screaming about bananas again. Not eating bananas. Not throwing bananas. Just the idea of them. Apparently, someone mentioned the word banana below deck, and now the ship is cursed. That's right. You're on a medieval ship where the presence of bananas is considered a direct insult to Poseidon himself. Or maybe it was St. Brendan. Or the wind nymphs. Depends who you ask and how many teeth they have left. Either way, someone's tearing through the cargo hold, checking for any hidden contraband fruit. You pull your blanket tighter, trying to disappear into the damp splinters of your bunk, whispering a little prayer to the god of potassium neutrality. Nobody wants to see a sailor froth at the mouth over tropical produce before breakfast. Let's talk about taboo cargo, shall we? In the golden age of maritime superstition, roughly any century where people thought leeches were a great medical idea, it wasn't just about what you said or did. It was what you brought. And some items were simply not welcome on board. Bananas, for instance, were blamed for everything from spoiled fish to missing crew. Why? Well, in some ports, bananas rotted quickly, and in poorly ventilated hulls, they gave off ethylene gas, which could cause other food to go bad, or attract insects, or ferment, or just generally ruin the vibe. But sailors didn't know science. They just knew bananas on board equals someone's going overboard. So, it became an ironclad superstition. Utter the word banana, and you risk waking up with fish tied to your boots. Dead fish. Maybe angry ones. Maybe it's just Dave again. He gets weird when he's scared. You sigh, Get up and try not to step in anything alive. Someone left their eel shoes near your bunk. You don't ask. You never ask. Breakfast is dry salted meat and hard biscuits, a meal chosen specifically to remind you that joy is for land people. You chew slowly, watching two grown men argue about whether the sky looks vengeful or mildly sarcastic. You vote sarcastic. You're ignored. The captain appears, already drunk on fermented raisins. He announces that someone has angered the stars, and until the ship's luck is reset, nobody is allowed to whistle. You weren't going to whistle, anyway. Because here's the thing, whistling is cursed. Medieval sailors believed whistling called the wind. And not politely. Aggressively. Loud whistling was like sending a rude invitation to a hurricane. It didn't matter if you were happy, bored, or trying to keep the rats away. If you whistled, you risked invoking a full-blown maritime tantrum from the heavens. So now, the ship is deathly silent. Even the waves seem quieter, as if they're also trying not to whistle. One guy clears his throat too loudly and gets slapped with a soggy rope. You go about your chores, scrubbing the deck with brine-soaked cloths that haven't been washed since the reign of Charlemagne. Your fingers are already raw, but you dare not complain, because complaining, too, is considered bad luck during certain lunar phases. Oh, yes. The moon. The moon rules everything here. When to sail. When to drop anchor. When to trim your beard. It's basically the ship's unpaid therapist. A full moon means strong tides and possibly stronger tempers. A new moon means caution, darkness, and spontaneous toe injuries. The crescent moon? Trickster energy. People disappear during crescent moons. Usually into barrels. Usually on purpose. There's even a mun aboard who claims to read the moon. His name is Fennec. Fennec smells like cheese that's been in a fight. He wears a patch over one eye even though he can see perfectly fine. He says the patch filters the false light. You don't know what that means, but it sounds like something people with no friends say a lot. Fennec points to the moon last night and said, "She's hungry tonight." Everyone immediately counted the rations again. Tonight, though, the moon is hidden. A cloudy, gray smear covers the sky. This is bad. No stars, no moon, no direction. That's how ships vanish. Not into the Bermuda Triangle, that hasn't been invented yet, but into the thick soup of fear and extremely sketchy navigational math. So what do you do when visibility is low? You release the chicken bones. Yes, chicken bones. A small bag of them, kept near the compass, is shaken and cast on the deck to divine direction. You're not entirely sure how this works, but the ship's priest claims the gods can nudge bones into hints. The problem is, the chicken bones are from last October. They smell like betrayal. But the crew is too far gone to question the funk of destiny. The bones clatter. One lands pointing east, another west. The third, directly at you. Everyone stares. Got secrets. Someone mutters. You shake your head. But now, they're watching you. Which means you'll probably be sleeping with one eye open tonight, and maybe with Fennec's fake eye patch. To distract yourself, you volunteer for rope duty. Rope is safe. Rope has no opinion. Rope just is. Unless, of course, it's braided counterclockwise. That's death rope. You check. Yours is braided clockwise. You whisper a thank you to the goddess of not logic. You're halfway through coiling when someone screams, "Dolphin." The boat erupts in cheers. Because dolphins are good luck. Specifically, they're believed to be souls of drowned sailors who got promoted. Seeing one means the sea is smiling on you, or at least mildly disinterested in killing you that day. You rush to the edge, heart hopeful, eyes squinting into the chop. And yes, there they are. Two dolphins, sleek, silver, laughing at you in that way dolphins do. Probably mocking your haircut. But still, you smile. Even you're not immune to a little good omen. Then, as if on cue, someone drops a mirror. A mirror on a medieval ship. That's like bringing a Ouija board to a funeral. The mirror cracks. 7 years bad luck. Instantly, 3 people start praying. One begins offering his lunch to the sea. Another starts eating the broken mirror in penance. He's stopped by the cook, who's mad not because of the mirror, but because someone wasted the last clean napkin. Things spiral. Fast. The captain declares an emergency salt ceremony. Everyone must rub salt on their forearms and recite the name of the ship's patron saint while hopping on one leg. You don't know the saint's name. You mutter Steve. No one notices. Then the ship's cat appears. Oh, yes. There's a cat. A black one, of course. Named Sir Meow Salad. Ship cats are actually normal. They eat rats, provide company, and sometimes, very occasionally, predict storms. Sir Meow Salad sits, tail twitching, staring into the wind. He meows once. Then again. The crew freezes. 3 meows means a change is coming. Or maybe it just means he wants fish. You hope it's the second one. Still, the men move differently now. Tense. Eyes darting to the horizon. Someone even reblesses the cannonballs. You don't have cannons, but you do have large metal balls. They're decorative. Probably. Night falls. Dinner is mostly silent. Bread, dried lentils, and existential dread. A mun named Brooke insists the lentils are shaped like a skull. Everyone agrees, mostly to avoid another salt ritual. You head to your hammock. It's slightly less moist tonight. You take that as a win. You've earned it. After all, you didn't whistle, invoke bananas, or insult any moons. You close your eyes to the gentle creak of the hull, the muttered prayers of tired men, and the soft rumble of a dolphin giggling in the dark. Sleep comes slowly, but it does come. Because the sea may be cruel, but superstition, for all its absurdity, offers something oddly comforting, the illusion of control. And sometimes, that's all you need. You wake up in the middle of the night to the sound of chanting. This is never a good sign. It's not Gregorian, and it's not joyful. It's somewhere between a Gregorian monk having a panic attack and a drunk pigeon doing karaoke in Latin. You lift your head from your mold-scented hammock, the same hammock that smells like wet despair and onions, and peek over the edge. You spot a group of sailors gathered in a circle, holding spoons. Not knives. Not candles. Spoons. They're whispering in hushed voices to a spoon compass, which is, as far as you can tell, a regular spoon, tied to a string, dangling over a circle of spilled wine. The wine, apparently, represents the ocean. The spoon, the soul of the ship. You're not sure what the string represents. Probably sanity. One man begins humming. Another begins crying. You pull the blanket over your head and pretend you didn't see anything. This, dear friend, is how sailors navigated when maps were considered luxury items and compasses were powered by vibes. But let's rewind a bit. Earlier that day, you made the mistake of asking someone what exactly made the ship's figurehead so sacred. They gasped. Literally gasped. Like you'd insulted their grandmother's bread recipe. Figureheads, those carved wooden women or monsters nailed to the prow of ships, were believed to contain the soul of the vessel. The prettier the figurehead, the luckier the ship. Which is deeply ironic, considering most of these things look like they were whittled during a thunderstorm by a blindfolded goat. But it didn't matter. What mattered was that she, yes, she, always referred to as a she, watched over the ship. She saw the storms coming. She guided the ship through fog, through pirate waters, and through the emotional meltdowns of overly superstitious deckhands. And if she fell off? Instant doom. Immediate ghost ship status. No refunds. So you, wise beyond your years, asked the next logical question: what happens if someone touches the figurehead? They didn't answer. They just slowly turned their heads in unison and stared at you until you offered to swab the latrines for a week. Which you now have to do. With a rag made of something that might once have been a shirt. Because touching the figurehead without performing a blessing first is basically asking for Poseidon to punch you in the face with a whale. The weirdest part? Some figureheads were rumored to whisper. Usually at night. Usually when you were alone. You haven't heard anything yet, but you suspect if she does speak, she'll ask why you keep humming Greensleeves off-key during storm prep. Back to the present, morning comes. You wake up with the taste of mildew and regret in your mouth. You stretch, kick off the rat that's been spooning you, and stumble topside. The wind is gone. And not just light breeze gone. This is dead calm. Flat seas. No wind. No waves. No direction. Just silence. This is worse than a storm. A storm is something. A storm means the gods are awake. But this is like being left on hold by the ocean. It's a maritime version of "we'll get back to you." The captain, who now smells like pickled goat dreams, orders a full wind summoning ritual. This involves burning an old rope, pouring rum into the sea, everyone cries. Singing a sea shanty backward. Releasing the emergency pigeon. That's right. You have a pigeon. His name is Percy. He's supposed to be a messenger bird, trained to fly back to port in case the ship gets lost. He's also an idiot who once flew in a circle for 3 hours and tried to mate with a lantern. Still, Percy is placed on the mast. The men chant. The sky watches. Percy poops. This is interpreted as a neutral sign. Then the cook suggests invoking Saint Elmo, not the fire, not the 1985 movie. The actual saint. Elmo of Formia. Patron saint of sailors, abdominal pain, and generally unpleasant deaths. Yes, Elmo. And if you're wondering whether the glowing blue flames that sometimes appear on masts and rigging during storms were named after him, you're absolutely correct. Saint Elmo's fire. Not actually fire. More like a weird plasma glow caused by electrical discharge. But in medieval times, it was divine. A sign that Saint Elmo was protecting the ship or at least showing up for his part-time gig. So the crew begins chanting to Saint Elmo. One man, possibly the cabin boy, possibly just short, begins smearing squid ink on the mast in the shape of an anchor. Another plays a lute with only 2 strings. The 3rd string snapped yesterday after being cursed for sounding flat. You are told to clap rhythmically. You do so. Badly. Fennec scowls at you and mutters something about discordant hands. You clap quieter. Eventually, the wind returns. Not because of the ritual, probably. More because that's how weather works. But nobody tells the crew that. They cheer. The sails swell. The ship groans with movement, and you lean against the railing, breathing in the briny scent of motion and partial success. A gull lands on the mast. Poops. Again. This is considered a blessing. Everything is a blessing if you say it out loud 3 times and squint. Later that evening, as the sun bleeds orange over the water like a hung-over apricot, the ship's priest gives a short sermon. It's about the mermaids. Oh, yes. The mermaids. Now, in modern culture, mermaids are dreamy, tragic beings with flowy hair and questionable taste in men. In medieval sailor culture, they were basically sea demons with great cheekbones. Seeing a mermaid? Cursed. Hearing one sing? Double cursed. Seeing one cry? Well, you might as well jump overboard now and save time. But of course, the human brain is excellent at turning distant sea mammals into seductive ghost fish. Especially when the entire crew is on a diet of salted meat, no sleep, and deeply repressed trauma. Some sailors swore they saw mermaids waving from the rocks. Others claimed mermaids lured them into the waves with promises of warmth and better food. It didn't take much. Honestly, if a sea sponge promised you a hot bath and clean socks, you'd probably follow it too. There's even one old guy, nobody knows his real name, who insists he married a mermaid in the Bay of Biscay. He says she left him because he snored. Nobody believes him, but they let him keep talking because he sharpens the knives, and that's not a man you want unhappy. Dinner is boiled oats and silence. You sit near the galley, picking weevils out of your spoon, while the wind rattles the lanterns just enough to make you wonder whether it's wind or something else. Someone knocks over a crate of spoons. Everyone gasps. Spoons, you see, are sacred. Not because of utility. Because of mirror spirits. Yes. Some believed that the reflective surface of spoons could attract the attention of jealous sea ghosts, especially if used after sunset, which means you're now eating with your hands, and your hands taste like rope. Again. And just when you think the night can't get weirder, someone spots a red sky in the west. Red sky at night, they whisper, sailor's delight. Except this isn't that kind of red. It's a blood red. A plague red. We definitely angered something ancient red. You look around. Fennec is counting his toes in the corner. The captain is talking to a barnacle. The priest is blessing a spoon. And the cook? He's just gone. Completely vanished. Only his apron remains. No one comments on it. You head below deck. Your hammock is slightly damp again. Something is scuttling nearby. Probably a crab. Possibly a spirit crab. You drift off to the sound of chanting, spoon tapping, and the soft whisper of the figurehead saying, "Don't eat the oats tomorrow." You make a mental note. And with that, you sleep. Not soundly. Not deeply. But enough to survive another day at sea, wrapped in superstition, stupidity, and the gentle insanity that binds all sailors together. Welcome back to the Superstitions of Medieval Sailors, where dreams are damp, the ocean is angry, and your blanket is definitely moving on its own. Don't worry. It's probably just a rat. Or regret. So far, you've narrowly avoided a spoon-related haunting, possibly married a mermaid by accident, and learned that Saint Elmo is less of a cuddly red monster and more of a divine electrician for ships. Excellent. Now let's talk about death. Specifically, how sailors avoided it, talked about it, prepared for it, and often confused it with flying fish. Because out at sea, death wasn't just a risk. It was practically a roommate. One who never paid rent, snored loudly, and occasionally dragged you into the abyss for fun. You wake up to the sound of bells. They're not church bells. You're not that lucky. No, these are small brass bells tied to the rigging, and no, they're not there to be charming or musical. They're there to ward off spirits. Specifically, the hungry dead, which sounds like a B-horror movie, but in this case refers to the souls of drowned sailors who supposedly still linger, jealous of the living. These bells are oiled daily with eel grease and whispered to every morning by the oldest man on board. His name is probably Walter, but everyone just calls him Old Knuckles. He hasn't blinked since February. No one asks why. Now, Old Knuckles also performs another sacred duty, the sea burial oath. Let's say, just hypothetically, someone dies. Maybe they fell from the crow's nest. Maybe they got in a knife fight over the last piece of pickled turnip. Maybe they just stopped being alive because the 14th century is a landmine of health hazards. Regardless, when someone dies, the body can't just be chucked overboard like spoiled cabbage. No, no, no. That's how you get ghost sharks. Yes, ghost sharks. According to at least one feverish logbook from 1378, throwing a body into the ocean without a proper sea burial causes it to return, not as a human ghost, but as a shimmering, skeletal shark that follows the ship for 13 days and screams at night. Yes, screams. Like a human, but through gills. So when death shows up, the ritual begins. First, the body is sewn into a sailcloth, with the final stitch going through the nose. This is to make sure the person is, actually dead. Because in those days, medicine was a hobby, and sleeping really hard looked a lot like definitely deceased. Then, a short prayer is said. Usually something like, "May the deep keep what the land could not. May the tide take what the wind could not bear. May no angry fish mistake you for bait." Then they drop you in, sometimes with a rock, sometimes with a spoon, occasionally with a note. No one ever says what's in the note. You assume it's just sorry in really bad Latin. Oh, and here's the fun part. If a body floats, that's bad. It means the soul refused to go under. Maybe it has unfinished business. Maybe it's just bad at sinking. Either way, if the corpse bobs back up, everyone has to fast for 3 days, burn all the rope knots, and sing Ave Maristella until the fish stop circling. You'd think that would be enough, but no. Enter death omens. Let's go through a few of the classics. Shoes upside down in the galley? Death is coming within a fortnight. Rat climbs the mainmast? That's not just vermin behavior, it's divine signaling. Whale breaching on the port side? Good luck. On the starboard? Someone's about to lose a toe. Or worse, a shark following the ship? Death. But if it swims in circles? Double death. With bonus plague. Accidentally whistling while scrubbing the deck. That means you're inviting the wind, and not the helpful kind. The hurricane kind. Sailors were forbidden to whistle. Ever. Unless told to by the captain. Or unless the ship was already on fire, in which case, all bets were off. Of course, modern minds would chalk this all up to anxiety, poor nutrition, and living in a rotting wooden box with no plumbing. But for medieval sailors, these signs were rules. Universal truths. You don't question the ocean. You apologize to it, and hope it lets you live. Now, sometimes death wasn't dramatic. Sometimes it was just quiet. Take the drifting ship. You've heard the stories. All sailors have. The ghost ship, seen at dawn, floating with full sails and no crew. Food still on the table. Hammock swaying gently. The figurehead grinning, even though she was carved without a mouth. No battle damage. No sign of a struggle. Just empty. These ships were considered cursed. Not haunted, exactly. More like abandoned by God. If you encountered one, the rules were strict. Do not board. No matter how tempting that cask of wine looks, do not speak its name out loud. Do not take anything, not even a spoon. Do not wave to the figurehead. She remembers. One sailor, again, possibly a liar, claimed he once saw a ghost ship shadowing their vessel for 3 days. Always behind them, never getting closer. Then, on the 3rd night, it vanished. The next morning, their cook was gone. The crew never spoke of it again, mostly because they liked the new cook better. Back aboard your own still-functioning death trap, the subject of omen birds arises. Some birds are good, like the albatross, which is sacred, holy, untouchable. Why? Well, blame poetry. The albatross, for centuries, was thought to carry the souls of drowned sailors. Killing one was like punching your own grandmother. The superstition became so intense that even looking at an albatross funny was considered rude. But if the bird chose to fly with your ship, that was a blessing. If it died near your ship, oops. Time to prepare the burial shanties. Now let's discuss the ship's cat. Cats aboard medieval ships weren't just cute. They were spiritual bodyguards with whiskers. Sailors believed cats could see ghosts, sense storms, and occasionally curse people with a single blink. If the cat sat near you during dinner, lucky. If the cat hissed at your boots, you'd be overboard by next week. Some captains even gave cats tiny collars made from silver fish scales as protection charms. The cat did not appreciate this. But no one argued with the cat. The cat outranked at least half the crew. You, unfortunately, are allergic to cats. So now you sneeze every time the spirit of the sea is being battled by feline eye contact. You are, effectively, spiritually defenseless. And that brings us to the concept of sea curses. Curses were everywhere. There were curses for stealing another man's salt, for sneezing during mast repairs, for wearing red on a Tuesday, for stepping aboard with your left foot first, and perhaps the most feared, the saltwater curse. It went like this. If someone made a deal with the sea, yes, the sea itself, and then broke it by failing to toss the promise coin or by using fresh water to clean a sacred bucket, then the sea would remember. And it would rise. The storm that followed would not be weather. It would be punishment. So when your crewmate dropped the offering coin into his boot instead of the ocean, there was only one thing to do. You threw the whole boot overboard, with his foot still in it. He understood. Later, while sipping tea made from dried algae and sadness, the captain shares his own superstition. He never writes down the ship's name. Speaking it, fine. But writing it down on paper, he says, gives death directions. Which explains why all your ship's logs refer to the vessel as the Big Wet Lady. You, naturally, write the real name in your private journal. That night, the ink runs. You didn't spill anything. You burn the journal and pretend you've never held a quill in your life. By now, your hammock is only mildly damp. Your dreams are full of cats wearing captain's hats. You hear whispering again, but it's probably just the guy next to you reciting his will. He does that sometimes. You sleep. Because what else is there to do? Tomorrow brings another day of sea, salt, and possibly shark-based revenge. But for tonight, the bells chime gently in the rigging. The figurehead smiles knowingly. The cat naps on the helm. And you dream of land that doesn't move. You're still aboard this creaky, mold-encrusted sea coffin, with ropes that groan louder than your stomach and a crew that believes in magical birds, ghost ships, and the unholy power of socks. Yes, socks. But today's lesson in maritime absurdity isn't about footwear or floating corpses. Today, we're talking about the elements. No, not the fun kind from your 6th grade science class with laminated posters and safety goggles. We're talking about the 4 humors of the sea. And if that phrase just made you raise an eyebrow and wonder if medieval sailors were consulting their local wizard before breakfast, you'd be absolutely correct. Welcome to a world where wind, water, fire, and earth aren't just things you sail through. They're mood swings with tempers. And where weather is not a natural phenomenon, but a cosmic punishment for bad behavior. But before we cast off into this sea of superstition and vaguely damn folklore, do me one tiny favor. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. I love seeing who's drifting off to sleep from across the globe. It's like a global slumber party, but with more barnacles and fewer snacks. All right, let's get elemental. You wake up to the sound of arguing. Again. This time, it's over wind direction, a critical issue on a medieval ship, especially when your sails are made of repurposed monastery curtains and prayer alone. The quartermaster is convinced that the sudden shift in wind last night wasn't meteorological. It was revenge. Apparently, someone insulted the wind by relieving themselves over the starboard rail while whistling a love song. The combination, he says, is a known offense to Boreas, the north wind. You have many questions. Chief among them, how does wine take offense? But no one wants your logic here. See, sailors believed each cardinal wind had a personality. Like co-workers, but angrier. Boreas, north wind, old, cold, bitter. Think of your least favorite uncle who smells like cloves and disappointment. Boreas brings storms and ruin, and if he shows up during a sunny voyage, it's because someone forgot to sacrifice an anchovy to him. Zephyrus, west wind, mellow, friendly, smells vaguely of oranges. Beloved by sailors for bringing calm weather and fair trade winds. Unfortunately, if you say his name out loud, he stops showing up. He hates compliments. Notice, south wind, hot, sweaty, and full of bad decisions. Notice is what happens when summer overstays its welcome and starts fermenting. He brings fog, confusion, and hallucinations, often blamed for sailors seeing mermaids, ghosts, or flying goats. Eurus, east wind, nobody likes Eurus. Eurus is a traitor. He spins the ship around, pushes you backwards, and has the emotional consistency of spoiled milk. If Eurus shows up, you kiss your arrival date goodbye and start rationing the dried beans. And no, this isn't Greek mythology class. This is everyday navigation. Because in the medieval sea world, personifying weather was how you negotiated with it. Prayers were whispered to favorable winds. Foul winds were cursed, then appeased with small tokens, feathers, seashells, or, on at least one occasion, a boiled sock. Don't ask. But weather wasn't the only temperamental element out here. Let's talk water. You'd think, being surrounded by it, sailors would have a good relationship with water. But no. Water is both life and death. It's what floats your ship and drowns your friends. It's what keeps your barrels full, until you discover the barrels are full of worms. That's right. Worms. See, fresh water had to be stored in wooden barrels, which, over time, grew mold, algae, and tiny wriggling things that may have been sea demons. Or just larvae. No one knew. No one wanted to know. The sailors just called it God soup. And they drank it anyway. To protect themselves from waterborne misfortune, sailors practiced barrel blessings. This involved tapping each barrel with a coral stick, reciting a crude poem about Saint Brendan, who definitely never approved it, and dropping in a silver coin or a tooth if coins were scarce. And when rain came, rain wasn't just sky water. It was sky judgment. Sailors would raise their arms and shout apologies into the wind, hoping that the rain would recognize their sincerity and not wash away their luck. Or their soup. Now we come to fire, perhaps the most paradoxical element at sea. Fire was both sacred and terrifying. It cooked your food. It heated your rum. But it also burned ships to the waterline, often in spectacular, shrieking fashion. Because your ship is made of wood, rope, tar, and rage. Lighting a fire on board meant following exact procedures, including only doing it in the firebox, a metal-lined square near the galley that was essentially a contained panic zone. Saying a brief prayer to Saint Florian, patron of firefighters and very stress cooks. Extinguishing it with saltwater urine, which was believed to cool down not just flames, but also bad luck. And yes, it smells exactly how you think. But fire also had spiritual uses. Sailors would burn bundles of dried seaweed to cleanse the ship, especially after a death, a mutiny, or someone bringing a banana aboard. We'll get to that. These smoky rituals weren't just tradition. They were believed to reset the elemental balance, which, considering most ships leaned to one side and smelled like eel sweat, was probably overdue. Finally, let's talk about Earth. There is no Earth at sea. And that's the problem. To a medieval sailor, being cut off from the earth for too long meant losing your soul's anchor. This wasn't just metaphorical. They believed your spirit could drift, unmoored, like a balloon with severe depression. So sailors carried earth tokens, little pouches of dirt from their hometown, sewn into their boots or tucked into a locker. Not for luck, but for identity. If the pouch got wet, panic. If it was lost, they'd beg the quartermaster to scoop dirt from a passing island, any island, just so they could feel connected again. Of course, no one actually wanted to land on these islands, because islands had their own problems. Like cursed sand. Some beaches, it was believed, had sand that whispered. You'd walk on it and hear voices, or so they claimed, telling you to stay, to sit, to just rest a while and let the tide come in. They called it siren soil. In truth, it was probably the sound of crabs, or wind, or the creeping insanity of vitamin deficiency. But the name stuck. So sailors avoided certain coasts, marked them on charts with little drawings of screaming faces, and passed the stories on. And then, of course, we must mention the fifth element, because of course there's a fifth element. Sailors called it luck. Luck isn't science. It isn't divine. It isn't even logical. But it is everything. A ship could be sturdy, the weather could be clear, the food could be only mildly haunted, but if your ship had bad luck, you were doomed. That's why sailors refused to rename ships, even if the name was the Stinking Codfather. Changing a name was set to confuse the spirits that watched over the vessel, causing them to abandon it entirely. It's also why they feared left-handed people, redheads, and anyone who had survived a shipwreck before. Those people were marked. The sea wanted them back. You once spilled a salt jar and didn't throw it over your left shoulder. Ever since then, the cat has stared at you funny. You're not sure it's coincidence. Now, as the sun sets over another endless stretch of brine, your crewmates gather to toss a handful of dried herbs into the sea. No one says anything. They just nod at the horizon, mutter a name, and go back to their hammocks. You don't ask what they're doing. You don't want to know. You sleep. Because superstition may be ridiculous, but it works. At least until it doesn't. And out here, it's better to believe in nonsense than nothing at all. You wake up to the scent of something burning. Not fire. Thankfully, that would mean the ship is about to become kindling in the middle of Poseidon's personal aquarium. No, this smell is different. Musky. Acrid. Something between fermented goat hair and boiled regret. You turn over in your damp, semi-dead hammock and see your bunkmate, a mun named Stumpy, not because he's missing limbs yet, but because he walks like he's trying to sneak up on earthquakes, standing in the corner, shirtless, with a bone needle jammed into his own shoulder. Next to him is another sailor, the artist. His job? Jabbing an ink made of ash, fish bile, and mystery stuff into Stumpy's skin in the shape of a squid strangling an angel. Why? Because it's Tuesday, and Stumpy says his luck's been off. Welcome to the world of medieval sailor tattoos, charms, and full-on maritime body sorcery, a place where your skin is both a diary and a defensive charm, and where self-stabbing with soot ink is somehow safer than trusting the ocean not to kill you. Now, before we start peeling back the sweaty, possibly infected layers of this tradition, go ahead and do the ritual. Tap that like button. Subscribe if you genuinely enjoyed this deeply questionable journey through historical insomnia, and drop a comment with your location and time zone. I promise, it's oddly comforting seeing that someone in Iceland is dozing off to stories about 13th century underarm witchcraft. Okay, let's talk tattoos. We tend to think of tattoos as rebellious, modern, edgy. But for medieval sailors, a tattoo was less a statement and more a survival mechanism. Think of it like magical insurance. Start with the classic, the compass rose. This wasn't because they liked geometry. It was believed that tattooing a compass on your chest or hand would help guide your soul home if your body didn't. Which, considering the average sailor's lifespan was somewhere between and soggy surprise, was a real concern. Then there were anchors, symbols of stability. In a world where everything moved, the deck, the sails, the wind, the rats, anchoring something to yourself felt comforting. Never mind that it was just ink. Anchors also represented hope. Which is ironic, because most men who got anchor tattoos did so after giving up hope. Mermaids were common, too, though not because sailors liked fantasy women. It was more of a "you saw one and lived to tell about it" badge. A sort of bragging right that doubled as a warning: don't follow the singing, it ends badly. Some tattoos were even more specific. Like a chicken and a pig, often tattooed on the feet or ankles. Why? Because chickens and pigs were kept in wooden crates aboard ships, and in the event of a shipwreck, those crates were the only things likely to float. So sailors believed that having these animals on your body might convince the ocean to spare you. Crosses on the soles of your feet, not for fashion, but to step on the devil wherever you walked. Because apparently, hell begins at the toes. A rope tattoo around the wrist usually meant a sailor had worked as a deckhand or on the rigging. It was also believed to keep your hands from slipping during storms, though in practice, most people just got rope burn anyway. Now let's get into the weird stuff. Tattoos were just one form of protection. Sometimes, skin wasn't enough. So sailors turned to charms. Let's begin with the sea bag, a small pouch worn around the neck or tucked into a boot. It might contain a tooth, usually not yours. Teeth from wolves, dogs, or even the odd monkey were believed to ward off evil spirits. Why would a monkey tooth protect you from drowning? No one knows. Don't ask questions. Knots, tied in a very specific way. 1 knot for wind, 2 for calm seas, 3 for protection from ghosts. Untie the wrong one. Storm. Nail clippings, yep. Yours, your mother's, or even your crewmates. Because nothing says protection like a stranger's toe DNA in a bag of lint. Then there were sigils. Now, this is where things drift into full-on sea witchcraft. Sigils, symbols drawn in ash or charcoal, were applied to the body before voyages. Common locations included the forehead, bad idea for tanning, the palms, they'd sweat off, or directly over the heart, very dramatic. These were drawn in silence, ideally during a new moon, while reciting a chant made up on the spot. Doesn't sound very effective, but apparently the improvisation was important. Pruridan spells were said to bore the sea spirits. The symbols looked like someone tried to draw a map while being attacked by a crab. Spirals, lines, runes, stars. If it looked messy and potentially cursed, it worked. And let's not forget the salt ritual. Salt was sacred. It preserved meat. It stopped wounds from festering. It made terrible stew slightly less terrible. And it was believed to keep demons away, both internal and oceanic. Sailors would rub salt on their wrists before setting sail. Not for hygiene, though that was a nice side effect, but to symbolically tie themselves to land. The salt of the earth, they called it. Literally. Of course, too much salt and you'd develop skin rashes, which they would then treat by rubbing it with more salt. Medicine was not a priority. There were also beliefs around hair. Namely, do not cut it. Hair, they thought, held memories and navigation strength. Cut it, and you might lose your sense of direction. Or, if you trimmed your beard on the wrong moon phase, you'd guarantee a mutiny. Barbers at sea were considered suspicious. Most of them ended up performing other tasks, like dentistry, which, in case you're wondering, involved pliers, screaming, and absolutely no anesthesia. And then there was the chicken foot. This is not a metaphor. Real chicken feet, dried and varnished, were worn on leather cords around the neck or wrist. Said to be a potent anti-drowning amulet, the chicken foot was believed to confuse death. Something about the claws scratching away fate. Why a chicken? Because they can't swim. That was literally the logic. If a bird who hates water survives, maybe you will too. On at least one recorded occasion, a sailor wore 2 chicken feet and ended up in a tavern brawl over a blessed turkey bone he claimed was even stronger. He did not survive the voyage. So, as your ship rocks gently under the stars and the ocean whispers all the things it plans to do to you if you step out of line, you lie back, examining the squid ink tattoo on your thigh, the monkey tooth around your neck, and the increasingly concerning rash on your shoulder. You wonder, are you protected? Or just decorated? But it doesn't matter now. Because in the mind of a medieval sailor, belief itself was power. The tattoos, the charms, the sigils, they weren't just folklore. They were armor. Against the sea. Against madness. Against the creeping dread that maybe, just maybe, the ocean really does want you. You roll over. Somewhere nearby, Stumpy is carving another charm. You don't ask what it's for. You don't want to know. You just hope it works. Because tomorrow, the storm comes. And all the chicken feet in the world might not save you from what's waiting in the deep. You wake up to the sound of screaming. Not the urgent, panic screaming of a man on fire or falling overboard. No, this is the long, drawn-out kind of scream. The kind that comes from deep inside the soul. The kind that says, "I regret everything." You peek your head over the edge of your hammock and spot the source, a sailor tied to the mast. His shirt has been removed, his back is red and raw, and the boatswain, a man with arms like cured hams and the emotional range of a brick, is standing next to him, rhythmically swinging a thick, many-tailed rope. Ah, the Cat O' Nine Tails. The medieval ship's version of a performance review. Welcome to the floating justice system. Or, more accurately, maritime chaos lightly held together by rope, fear, and bleeding. See, a ship in the medieval world was a microcosm of society. If society had zero privacy, constant motion sickness, and the threat of public flogging for stealing biscuits. It's time to explore the legal system aboard medieval ships, which is a lot like regular legal systems, except there's no lawyer, no judge, and the court stenographer is just a guy who can't read but loves gossip. So before we climb the mast of injustice, gently tap that like button. Subscribe if you enjoy drifting into unconsciousness while learning about human suffering. And leave a comment with your current time and location. Bonus points if you've ever been punished for something you didn't do. We see you, middle siblings. All right. Let's begin with the ship's hierarchy, because understanding who's allowed to punish you is key to avoiding accidental falls overboard. At the top is the captain. He's not just in charge, he's king, judge, and, when the rum runs out, marriage counselor. Below him is the first mate or the master. Think of this guy as the captain's enforcer. He doesn't smile. He's never wrong. He can spot a loose knot from 30 feet away, and he'll make you tie it again, blindfolded, if you so much as blink at it funny. Then there's the boatswain, short for bosun, the man with the whip and no regard for personal boundaries. His job is to maintain discipline, and by maintain, we mean inflict. You're at the bottom, lower than the rats. Even the ship's cat has more authority than you. At least he gets fed regularly. And on this ship, justice isn't blind. It's angry, drunk, and very, very creative. Let's begin with the basics. Flogging, the go-to punishment for everything from theft to sleeping on the job. The whip of choice is the Cat O' Nine Tails, a rope flogger with 9 knotted ends. Why 9? Because 10 would be overkill and 8 isn't scary enough. Each lash cuts the skin. After 3, you're crying. After 9, you're bleeding. After 24, you're a cautionary tale. Some ships use salt water to clean the wounds, not because it was hygienic, but because it made the pain last. A little reminder to behave next time you think about taking someone's stale biscuit. But maybe you're lucky. Maybe you don't get flogged. Maybe you're just keel-hauled. Let me walk you through this one. Keel-hauling is when you're tied to a rope, thrown over one side of the ship, and then dragged under the keel, the thick, barnacle-encrusted spine of the vessel, and pulled up on the other side. Yes, that's real. It's basically medieval power washing, but with your body. If you survive, congratulations. You'll likely be covered in cuts, full of seawater, and haunted by barnacle-related PTSD for the rest of your short life. If you don't survive, well, that's one less mouth to feed. What sort of crimes could get you keel-hauled? Let's see. Falling asleep during your watch. Drunkenness, unless you're the captain, then it's leadership. Talking back. Looking at the captain's daughter's drawing of a mermaid too long. And yes, those were all recorded reasons. Then there's the thumbscrew. Not a metaphor. This is a device designed to crush your thumbs. Sometimes used as a punishment, sometimes as an encouragement to reveal who snuck extra rum from the stores. It's deeply ironic. On a ship where manual labor is your entire life, they punish you by making your hands unusable. Very productive. If that's not enough, how about mast tying? You're bound to the main mast, arms overhead, sometimes for hours. Rain, sun, wind, it doesn't matter. You stand there like a living scarecrow, while your crewmates walk by and pretend not to laugh. This was often reserved for cowardice, which could mean anything from flinching during a storm to not singing loud enough during work songs. Another popular punishment, reduced rations. The worst crime on a ship isn't murder. It's messing with the food. Steal an extra chunk of salt pork? Enjoy a week on weevil bread and warm bilge water. That'll teach you. And if you're feeling fancy, there's always Bilbo's iron shackles for your legs bolted to the deck. Basically, a timeout with tetanus. But not every punishment involved pain. Some were purely psychological. Like naming and shaming. Imagine being made to wear a fish around your neck for a day because you dropped a rope. Or being given a new nickname, Slack-Jawed Jeffrey, for messing up a knot. And it sticks. Forever. Even worse, being denied rum. That's right. Rum rationing was sacred. Take it away, and morale drops faster than a cannonball in a bucket. It was the sailors' antidepressant, antiseptic, and liquid courage all in one. So if you got in trouble, they might cut your ration. Or worse, make you watch while everyone else drank theirs. Cold. Brutal. Effective. Of course, not all discipline came from above. Sometimes the crew took matters into their own hands. These were called folk punishments, and they were imaginative. For example, ducking, where the offending sailor is held upside down and dunked overboard repeatedly. Good for cooling tempers and washing off lice. Bad for lungs. Or the running the gauntlet, where the crew lines up and hits you with ropes, sticks, or whatever's handy as you run past. Think of it like dodgeball, but with bruises and grudges. Then there's tar and feathering. Rare, but possible. Especially on pirate ships. You mess with the loot, you get a free spot treatment, medieval style. Of course, sometimes, things went too far. A mutiny wasn't just a drama, it was a death sentence. If you even joked about tossing the captain overboard, you could find yourself facing hanging from the yardarm, a lovely term that means being strung up by the neck until your feet forget how to be alive. Executions weren't always public. Sometimes, you were just set adrift, given a cask of water, a biscuit, and a paddle, and told to find your own fate. No one ever did. And that, dear sleeper, is how justice was maintained on the high seas, through fear, spectacle, and enough physical trauma to keep everyone just cooperative enough. As the stars twinkle above and the waves rock your ship like a cradle full of knives, you feel a little safer knowing you haven't done anything to anger the bosun today. Yet. But there's always tomorrow. And on this ship, even a sneeze at the wrong time could lead to a memorable disciplinary event. Sleep well. You wake up in a sweat, heart racing, eyes wide open in the pitch dark of the hold. You sit up slowly, clutching your chest, trying to remember where you are, why your skin feels like it's being licked by an octopus with cold breath, and what that sound was, the groaning wood, the rhythmic splash, the distant, bone-rattling wail. Then you remember. You're not in a nightmare. You're on a ship, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by black water, salt wind, and the kinds of noises that make grown men silently cry into their moldy blankets at night. Congratulations! You've officially entered the chapter of your voyage titled, "The Things in the Water Are Probably Worse Than Drowning." Tonight, we explore the sea monsters of the medieval sailor's mind, those long, slimy, tentacled horrors that lurk just below the surface of reason, waiting for a bad dream, a foggy horizon, or a spoiled fish stew to claw their way into collective belief. So before we sail straight into madness, don't forget to like this video, subscribe if you find comfort in historical chaos, and comment with your location and current time. I love watching this odd little sleep cult spread across time zones. Welcome. You're safe here. Well, not on the boat, but in the comments? Totally safe. Let's begin. You might think sailors were superstitious because they were ignorant. No, they were superstitious because the sea is an actual horror movie, and your mind will do anything to make sense of it. You stare into the mist for hours on end. The sun fries your brain. You haven't seen a real vegetable since spring. Your teeth feel soft, and something just brushed your leg when you were dangling it over the rail. Was it a dolphin? Was it a shark? Was it her? Let's start with her, the mermaid. Not the Disney kind. The medieval mermaid was terrifying. She didn't sing. She shrieked. She didn't comb her hair coquettishly. She thrashed in the water, her face pale and corpse-like, dragging sailors into the deep with fingernails like fishhooks. Mermaids were a warning sign. If you saw one, it meant the ship was doomed. Or the cook was hoarding lard again. Hard to tell which. Sailors swore they saw them. Women with the lower halves of fish, waving from rocks in the fog, mouths too wide, eyes too still. What were they really seeing? Probably manatees. But when you've been chewing hardtack for 3 months and the last woman you saw was a smudged ink drawing on someone's back, your brain will take liberties. Next up, the Kraken. This wasn't just a big squid. The Kraken was said to be the size of an island. Sailors claimed that entire ships were swallowed whole, dragged beneath the waves by arms longer than the mainmast. It would rise from the deep, split the sea, blacken the sky with ink, and crush your vessel like a child stomping on a sandcastle. And it was always just out of sight. Behind that wave. Under that fog. Breathing, maybe. Some stories say it only surfaced once every century. Others say it followed ships that sang in the wrong key. More likely, they saw a whale. But whales weren't well understood. If you had never seen a living creature larger than your house suddenly explode out of the water and exhale steam through its head, you, too, might scream sea demon and soil yourself. Then there were the serpents. Long, black, coiling things. Sometimes with fins, sometimes with wings, sometimes with the face of a lion. These were sea dragons in early medieval bestiaries. One drawing shows a ship being sucked into the spiral of a serpent's tail, its masts snapping like toothpicks. Descriptions vary, but common themes include eyes like lamps, breath like fire, which makes no sense, but let's go with it. A tendency to sing psalms and reverse Latin before eating you. One sailor wrote of a beast whose back was like a row of barrels and whose tongue was forked like a devil's pitch. Was he drunk? Certainly. Was he lying? Probably. Did people believe him? Absolutely. Why? Because seeing monsters was a shared tradition. If someone shouted beast and pointed, everyone looked, everyone squinted into the waves, and suddenly, you saw it too. Your brain wants to connect the dots. Even if there are no dots. Just foam and existential dread. It wasn't just things in the water. Sometimes the monsters were in the sky. Let's talk about storm spirits. They were called cloud demons, sky witches, or, my personal favorite, thunder women. Sailors believed storms were caused by supernatural entities riding the wind, punishing ships for bad songs, bad thoughts, or bad hygiene. To appease them, sailors would sing, or cry, or throw things overboard, often valuable things, just to make the storm stop. In one account, a ship threw their entire cargo of pepper overboard to stop a gale. It worked. The storm stopped. Did that prove the storm was caused by angry spirits? No. Did it feel like it did? Absolutely. Humans love patterns, even imaginary ones. And then there were the ghost ships. Sailors swore they saw other ships, glowing pale, moving with no wind, no crew, no sails, drifting silently across the water. If one passed you, it meant someone on your ship would die. Probably soon. Probably you. Some say these ships were cursed vessels, crewed by the damned. Some said they were hallucinations caused by moldy bread and fermented onion water. Still others claimed they were reflections of the dead, ships sunk long ago, replaying their final voyage in the thin veil between night and dawn. Now, let's talk about scurvy hallucinations, because this explains a lot. Scurvy isn't just a disease. It's a slow descent into madness. You start with bleeding gums. Then teeth fall out. Then your skin bruises when you look at it too hard. And then, the visions begin. Men reported seeing glowing fish, floating cities, women in red cloaks walking on water, angels in the rigging, and, in one case, a talking eel who sang lullabies. These weren't dreams. They were convinced it was real. And so these became part of the lore. One sailor claimed to have seen a fish with the face of his wife. It blinked, smiled, and then swam away. He cried for 3 days. Another saw a glowing baby octopus climb aboard, whisper soon, and vanish. No one else saw it. But no one slept for a week, just in case. Even sounds played tricks. The creaking of the ship. The moaning of the wood. The splash of water against the hull. All of it can sound like voices. Whispers. Warnings. In one recorded voyage, a sailor jumped overboard because he swore the sea was calling his name in his dead mother's voice. Did he survive? No. Did the story? Oh yes. And of course, every crew had that one guy. The storyteller. The one who claimed to have survived being swallowed by a whale, or made love to a mermaid, or fought off a sea dragon with nothing but a spoon. His stories were mostly lies. But at sea, lies become comfort. And comfort becomes truth. So as you lie there tonight, the boards above you creaking like they're trying to confess something, the sea groaning against the hull like a drunk grandfather muttering in his sleep, ask yourself, do you really want to look over the edge? Do you really want to see what's swimming next to the ship? Or is it better not to know? Isn't it nicer to pull the blanket over your head and pretend it's just the waves? Sleep well. Try not to dream of glowing fish with human eyes. You wake up slowly this time. Groggy. Disoriented. Stuck to your blanket in 3 places. You're not sure if it's sweat, sea mist, or soup that's made its way into the fibers. Actually, you're not even sure if it was a blanket or if someone just threw a fishing net over you while you were asleep. Congratulations, it's another blessed day on your medieval sea voyage. You survived the ghost ship. The Thunder Women didn't explode your mast. And the Kraken? Probably just a floating log. Probably. But just when you thought it couldn't get worse, your stomach reminds you. Ah yes, it's mealtime. And today's chapter? We're diving fork first into one of the most deeply tragic sagas in all of maritime history. Food, what medieval sailors ate, and what ate them back. And before we tuck into this culinary slow-motion disaster, take a moment, while you're not yet violently nauseous, to like this video if you're still awake or at least still alive. Subscribe if you enjoyed drifting off to tales of historic indigestion. And drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is there. Are you in bed? On a couch? Lost at sea emotionally? I want to know. Okay. Strap in. Loosen your belt. Or tighten it. You won't be needing it much longer. Let's begin with the star of the medieval sailor's diet, hardtack. If you don't know what hardtack is, imagine a cracker. Now remove all joy, flavor, or softness from it. Now bake it until it's hard enough to break teeth and dry enough to double as roof shingles. Congratulations. You now have hardtack, also known affectionately as ship biscuit, sea bread, or why God abandoned us. Made from just flour, water, and suffering, hardtack was baked until it was essentially immortal. It could survive years at sea, pests, mold, and most blunt weaponry. The only thing it couldn't survive was human digestion. You didn't bite into hardtack. You attacked it with a hammer. Or you soaked it in something, water, beer, soup, or tears, to soften it first. And if that wasn't bad enough, it had roommates. Yes, friends. I introduce you now to weevils, tiny beetles who took one look at your biscuit and said, yes, we live here now. Every sailor had a different method of removing them. Some tapped the biscuit to shake them out. Others ate in the dark so they wouldn't have to see what they were crunching. Then there was John, who named them and held funerals. Let's move on to salted meat. This was meat that had been soaked in brine, sometimes for days, sometimes for months, and stored in barrels that smelled like regret. Beef, pork, maybe even fish. The only consistent thing was that it was so salty your soul puckered. Sailors would chisel it out of the barrel, cut off the green bits, or not, and boil it until it vaguely resembled protein. The meat was usually gray, occasionally purple, and sometimes, if you were lucky, it would glow slightly in the dark. Was that natural bioluminescence? No, it was botulism. But you ate it anyway, because it was either that or another bite of hardtack. Some ships supplemented this with peas, which by week 5 became more like pea dust. You could rehydrate it into a soup if you like your peas tasting like rainwater and barnyard. Speaking of soup, let's talk about ship stew, the great mystery of the medieval menu. No one really knows what was in it. Each pot was a roulette wheel of leftovers, salted meat, biscuit crumbs, dried legumes, old onions, questionable seawater, and whatever unidentifiable gloop they found behind the galley. Some of the stew had names like loblolly or slumgullion. None of them sound good. All of them had a texture like apology. Vegetables? Not really. You might get some dried beans if you were lucky. But by month 2, everyone was running on a diet of salt, carbohydrates, and regret. Now let's talk rats. Oh yes, you didn't just sail with them. Sometimes, in the most desperate times, you ate them. Rats were everywhere. And they were thriving. Why? Because you were dropping crumbs, spilling beans, and, let's be honest, not the best at sanitation. Some sailors captured rats, roasted them, and convinced themselves it was just like rabbit. Spoiler alert, it wasn't. Others made friends with the rats. Named them. Fed them hardtack. Sang them sea shanties. There are even records of crews refusing to kill the rats because they believed rats would abandon ship before it sank, and killing them would anger the sea gods. So they were both pets and omens. Then came the maggot situation. Flour, even the driest stuff, would eventually get infested. The bread and biscuits were crawling. so you'd sift them out. Or, again, just eat in the dark and pretend those weren't little legs tickling your tonsils. For flavoring? Well, you had vinegar, which doubled as a cleaner, mouthwash, and moral support. You might also get some mustard seed, dried herbs, or, in the rare case of a well-stocked vessel, a bit of saffron, though that probably meant you were on a spice ship owned by someone who paid his crew with promises and debt. Water? No. You don't get fresh water. You get ship water, stored in wooden casks, gone green with algae after a few weeks, and occasionally hosting its own little ecosystem. By the time you drink it, it's slimy, warm, and faintly carbonated from fermentation. You drink it anyway, because thirst is worse than bad taste. Or, if your captain liked you, you got beer. It wasn't strong, but it was safer. Low alcohol, vaguely malty, and only mildly sour. And yes, that counts as a win. Then there was grog, a mixture of rum, water, and sometimes lime juice, created more in the age of sail, but occasionally seen in its early, sketchier forms here. It was meant to disinfect the water. Mostly it just made you care less about how disgusting it was. And that, friends, is where we start talking about the bowel consequences of all this. When your diet is made of dried flour, rotting meat, and warm alcohol, your digestive tract files for early retirement. Some men didn't poop for a week. Others couldn't stop. Scurvy, the old favorite, made your gums bleed and your joints ache, but it also made your gut slow to a crawl. You'd sit on the edge of the ship, pants down, over the sea, hoping to avoid a rogue wave and a public embarrassment. Toilet paper? No. Leaves, rags, your hand, or nothing. That's it. Just salt air and shame. Dessert? Let me stop you right there. If you were lucky, you might get a dried fruit, an old fig, or a hard raisin that somehow survived the rats. If you were unlucky, your dessert was a spoonful of molasses, served as medicine, morale, or passive-aggressive punishment. And now we arrive at the great irony. Sailors had access to the sea, full of fish, and yet many ships didn't fish. Why? Because fishing took time. It took tools. It took bait. And some captains didn't want to risk a man being dragged overboard by something larger than expected. But when they did fish, it was a joyous day. You might get salted cod, boiled eel, or the king of unpleasant textures, jellied fish pie. All of it washed down with a burp, a groan, and a prayer. So as you settle in for the night, your stomach twisting with imagined hunger, remember, medieval sailors didn't eat to live. They lived despite what they ate. Food wasn't just sustenance. It was a slow, prolonged insult. It was what reminded you, 3 times a day, that the sea might not kill you, but the kitchen probably would. Sleep tight. Dream of soft bread, ripe fruit, cold, clean water. Because here, on this creaking wooden coffin, there's no avocado toast. Just barley mush and bad decisions.